President Biden and convicted felon Donald Trump commemorated the 4th of July in two very different ways, even as Trump and MAGA Republicans and their allies on the Supreme Court of the United States attempt to destroy our democratic republic and return us to some sort of illiberal monarchy. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video, but just to give you a snapshot, I'm going to show you President Biden's official Twitter page, the private Twitter page of Joe Biden, so in his capacity as a public official, as President of the United States, and then just Joe Biden's Twitter page, and then show you Donald Trump's 4th of July message. So on President Biden's official Twitter page, he says, "Year after year, we've come together today to celebrate freedom, liberty, and independence. Today, Jill and I look forward to tonight's celebration and wish you all a wonderful 4th of July. Happy Independence Day, America. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops." That was the official President Biden Twitter page. Then he says on his private page or whatever, the other page, just at Joe Biden, "As we celebrate the 4th of July, I'm grateful for the countless service members who are the backbone of who we are as a nation. Their service reminds us that democracy is never guaranteed. Every generation must fight to maintain it." Very affirmative. Now let's get to Donald Trump. "Happy 4th of July, including to our highly incapable president who uses prosecutors to go after his political opponent, who choked like a dog during the debate but tried to pretend it was international travel, only 12 days rest. And when the gig was up," I think he meant to say jig was up, "he blamed it on a cold. Therefore, why would anyone say he's cognitively challenged? Also, respects to our potentially new Democratic challenger, Laugh-In Kamala Harris. She did poorly in the Democratic nomination process, starting out at number 2 and ending up defeated and dropping out even before going to Iowa, but that doesn't mean she's not a highly talented politician. Just ask her mentor, the great Willie Brown of San Francisco, someone that I have to compliment as a deranged Biden prosecutor named Jack Smith, who's become a legend in his own mind for all of those cases he has lost. The corrupt prosecutors are working hard for Crooked Joe, but it will never be enough. Make America great again." Two very different approaches to commemorating this holiday. But I do have some clips I want to show you, speaking of the 4th of July, from President Biden and his official campaign, and also the Lincoln Project, because they set the stakes for how particularly important this 4th of July, 248 years after the original Independence Day, why this one is just so damn important. So we're going to play these two ads, this first one being from President Biden.
Multiple capital entries.
The president is now a king above the law.
Okay.
That's her bottom line in her dissent. Sotomayor.
He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, no, other than day one.
Revenge does take time, and sometimes revenge can be justified based on what they've done. I would have every right to go after them.
What do you think happens next? Stop Donald Trump. Yeah, it's very ominous. It's very powerful. It's also 100% true. It's just 100% true. Setting the stakes. What will happen if he becomes president again with this newfound immunity? And yes, where we're going with this, because this video is as much about the recent Supreme Court ruling regarding presidential immunity as it is anything else. But I do want to show you this other ad from the Lincoln Project.
July 4th, a day to celebrate America, a day of pride in our country, a day we stop and thank God we are living in the greatest country on earth. That's how most Americans feel about our country, but not Donald Trump.
And we're a third world country. We've become like a third world nation. We're literally an uncivilized country now.
Not our America, not the country we love. What's wrong with Donald Trump? Why does he hate America so much? He is ashamed of America, and he's wrong. This 4th of July, be proud of our country, of what we've done, of what we've overcome. Be proud of who we are. America is bigger than this moment, bigger than these divisions, bigger than this man.
Great ad from the Lincoln Project. Again, they know how to put things in very stark and important terms. But yes, as you can expect, this conversation, this video is about the recent Supreme Court ruling. We're probably going to have many videos about this, honestly. I mean, especially in the days to come. So much of this past week, or at least the past several days, I have been trying to wrestle with the text of the ruling, the text of the dissent, the implications of the ruling, the implications on this upcoming election, the implications of this upcoming election on future elections, and also the commentary from legal experts as well. There was so much risk and threat packed into these. It was a 41-page majority opinion by Chief Justice Roberts. And the Dobbs decision, which repealed Roe v. Wade or overturned Roe v. Wade, that was incredibly impactful to so many Americans and so many families. There's no question about that. And it was also a motivating factor electorally for Democratic victories in 2022 and the off-season elections in 2023. And it's probably going to play a big role, win or lose, in this year's elections. The recent Chevron ruling by the Supreme Court, it overturned a 40-year precedent known as the Chevron deference, which effectively says, listen, Congress makes law, but Congress aren't experts. Congress aren't environmental, climate, energy experts. They write laws about these things, but it's the career experts who work under Democratic and Republican administrations, environmental, chemical, energy, military experts, whatever, who understand the nuts and bolts of these things. So the Chevron deference has been in place under Republican and Democratic administrations and effectively says, listen, you got to work, you got to color within the lines of congressional law, but in terms of enforcing and interpreting certain ambiguities in law, if it's not clean and clearly spelled out, Republicans and Democrats historically have deferred to experts. You can still challenge it legally, right? I mean, the courts will have the final say in terms of adjudication, but a lot of deference was paid to experts. And the Supreme Court stripped that. And they're like, actually, no. And they assumed more power unto themselves. That was also incredibly dangerous with enormous ripple effects for the foreseeable future and potentially beyond. And then the Supreme Court ruling about presidential immunity, that one in many ways is worse than all of them. And certainly the immediate threat, the immediate danger posed by a rogue president who is now effectively unprosecutable, who is above criminal liability. It's hard to imagine something more dangerous. And I want to play you a couple of clips from President Biden's speech in the aftermath of the immunity case. Again, keep this in mind. Literally today at the time of recording, as we celebrate a day in which the colonies emancipated themselves from the British crown, from King George III. Keep all of that in mind and listen to what the president has to say about the impact of the Supreme Court presidential ruling on his office.
At the outset of our nation, it was the character of George Washington, our first president, that defined the presidency. He believed power was limited, not absolute. And that power always resides with the people, always. Now, over 200 years later, with today's Supreme Court decision, once again, it'll depend on the character of the men and women who hold that presidency that are going to define the limits of the power of the presidency, because the law will no longer do it. I know I will respect the limits of the presidential powers I have for 3.5 years, but any president, including Donald Trump, will now be free to ignore the law. I concur with Justice Sotomayor's dissent today. Here's what she said. She said, in every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. End of quote. So should the American people dissent. I dissent.
Great part where he appeals to the Cincinnatus principle of President Washington. As you know, I think the most important president, the one who set the standard for all to come, including President Lincoln. One other clip I want to show you from that speech, which I probably should have played first, but this is the very beginning of it.
The presidency is the most powerful office in the world. It's an office that not only tests your judgment, perhaps even more importantly, it's an office that tests your character. Because you not only face moments when you need the courage to exercise the full power of the presidency, You also face moments where you need the wisdom to respect the limits of the power of the office of the presidency. This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do.
And that's incredibly dangerous. I mean, we talked about much of this in the last video, but again, I think a recurring thesis of my channel has been Democrats are the better party, right? The Democratic Party, for all its faults, they have a better policy record. They have better policy affirmations. They have a better agenda. They have a more empathetic agenda. They are the party, in my opinion, that eligible voters in particular should vote for and back. The Republican Party is an authoritarian cult of personality with no limiting principle and a terrible record of governance. And again, they've devolved into a cult that worships Donald Trump. They gleefully sacrifice principle on the altar of whatever's politically expedient for Donald Trump. And then another thesis is that even though the Republican Party is the immediate, most dangerous obstacle, at the end of the day, the Supreme Court of the United States is the final boss of democracy. The Supreme Court of the United States is the ultimate challenge. Even in this recent Supreme Court decision, which presidential immunity is conferred to the president, the Supreme Court is ultimately the arbiter of what is or is not an official act, what is or is not in the outer perimeter of the president's authority. They give so much latitude to the president, but still keep enough in check where they're the ones at the end of the leash. They have lifetime appointments. You can't elect them. You can't reelect them. They have no binding code of conduct. They have no binding code of ethics. And there's been a conservative majority for 50 years. They are, in many ways, the most powerful and most dangerous branch, if only because we, the people, have just accepted that. They have no army. They have no law enforcement. They don't control the power of the purse. They don't have the power of the sword. But we have given undue deference to the Supreme Court of the United States, despite the fact that the Founding Fathers did not want the court to be the most powerful branch, despite the fact that the Founding Fathers did not want the President of the United States to be given absolute immunity. That's too much like a king. So they have no legitimacy. They have betrayed their founding principles. They have betrayed the vision of the Founding Fathers, which is a group of textualists and originalists who are supposed to care about the letter of the Constitution and the animating spirit of the Founding Fathers. They disregard it casually. Once they have a predetermined outcome, then they just reverse engineer and slap legalese on it in order to try to sell it to people. This is an enormous problem. This also raises the stakes of the upcoming election even more, because it means that if we don't win, Donald Trump, who has already espoused terrible vision, wanting to pursue critics in the media, wanting to round up immigrants, wanting to punish and prosecute his political enemies, which might not just be Joe Biden and Barack Obama, it could be pondering politics, it could be YouTubers, it could be people in the YouTube comment section, it could be whatever. Now he would be more unfettered. There would be no threat, no potential threat for criminal prosecution or criminal accountability for a rogue criminal president. But it can't just be that Democrats just have to win every election from now until the end of time. That would be great, especially if the Republicans are the alternative. But it's very likely that eventually a Republican will become president, which means we have to change this court, if nothing else, to change this particularly dangerous decision. And we're going to keep talking about this on this channel as the election draws near. And again, in the context of July 4th, 248 years ago, again, emancipating ourselves from a distant king, a distant monarchy, this is the context you should be thinking about this day. Let me know what you think in the comments.